The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning when Boone Carter had exactly $17 to his name. His dog Rusty sniffed the yellowed envelope while Clara Bell watched from the kitchen window, her breakfast growing cold. The return address meant nothing to him. Malachi Brooks, some distant relative he'd never met, from a place he'd never heard of. "You inherit my ranch and everything on it," the letter read in shaky handwriting. "Look for what I couldn't take with me. The answer is where the old oak stands alone." Boone stared at the deed attached. 200 acres of what the county records called unproductive land in the middle of nowhere. Clara pressed closer, reading over his shoulder. "Papa, why would someone leave you land?" "Don't know, sweetheart. Don't make sense." But nothing made sense about Malachi Brooks. The lawyer's note mentioned he'd been a hermit, lived alone for 30 years, died with no close family. Yet somehow this stranger knew Boone's full name, knew exactly where to find him. How does a man with nothing to leave know about a struggling farmer 3 territories away? 2 days later, after a long journey by wagon, standing in front of the most broken-down ranch house he'd ever seen, Boone wondered if this inheritance was more burden than blessing. Rotted boards hung loose from the walls. Windows gaped like empty eye sockets. The barn looked ready to collapse at the first strong wind. Clara kicked at a rusted metal box half buried near the porch steps. "What's this, Papa?" Inside the box were things that made no sense together. A hand-drawn map of the property with strange symbols, a key that fit no lock they could find, and a photograph of a man who looked exactly like Boone. But the picture was dated 40 years ago, before Boone was even born. Rusty began barking at something near the tree line. Following the dog's lead, they found the old oak the letter had mentioned. Carved deep into its bark were the same symbols from the map, weathered but clear. Below them, barely visible unless you knew where to look, were initials, MB plus EC. What's buried stays buried until the time is right. Clara traced the letters with her finger. "Papa, who's EC?" Boone's throat went dry. His mother's name had been Eleanor Carter. Eleanor Carter, who died when he was 12, who never once mentioned having a brother named Malachi. Eleanor Carter, who used to tell him stories about buried treasure and family secrets. Stories he'd dismissed as fairy tales meant to comfort a grieving child. But if Malachi was his uncle, if Eleanor was the EC carved into this tree, then the broken-down ranch wasn't just an inheritance. It was a message that had been waiting 30 years for the right person to receive it. The question was, what had his mother and this mysterious uncle buried that was worth leaving cryptic clues for? The first shovel of dirt told Boone everything he needed to know about his inheritance. Rock-hard ground, baked by years of drought, with soil so poor it couldn't grow weeds. He wiped sweat from his forehead and looked at the map again. The symbols seemed to mock him from the yellowed paper. Clara sat cross-legged beside the old oak tree, turning the mysterious key over in her hands. "Papa, this key is heavy, real heavy. Feel the weight." Boone took it from her. She was right. The metal felt dense, almost golden, but tarnished black with age. Along the shaft, tiny engravings caught the morning light. Numbers, maybe coordinates, or maybe just scratch marks from decades of neglect. "We should check the house again," Clara said. "Maybe there's a box we missed or a safe." They'd already torn through every room twice. The house was empty except for dust, cobwebs, and the lingering smell of abandonment. But Clara had that determined look in her eyes, the same expression her mother used to get when she'd set her mind on something. Inside the ranch house, Clara ran her fingers along every wall, checking for loose boards or hidden panels. Boone watched her methodical search and felt a stab of worry. Back home, the bank notices were piling up on their kitchen table. He'd borrowed against everything they owned to keep their small farm running, and now those loans were coming due. "Here!" Clara's voice echoed from the back bedroom. "Papa, come here!" She'd found a loose floorboard near the window. Underneath, wrapped in oilcloth, was a leather journal filled with his uncle's handwriting. The pages were brittle, yellowed at the edges, but the ink was still dark and readable. Boone opened to the first entry. "Eleanor came by today. She's worried about the boy. Says he's got the same stubborn streak as our father. I told her the secret dies with us, but she thinks different. She thinks someday Boone might need what's buried here more than we do." Clara leaned over his shoulder as he flipped through more pages. Entry after entry mentioned Eleanor, mentioned Boone by name, mentioned something called the collection. But one entry from 15 years ago caught his attention. "Sold another piece to the collector in Denver today. The 1933 Double Eagle brought in $2 million alone. Eleanor thinks I'm crazy for not spending it. But this isn't about money. It's about preserving history. The collection is worth over 100 million now, but it's worthless if the wrong people get it. Papa, look at this one. Clara pointed to an entry dated just 3 months ago. Eleanor's boy is struggling now. Lost his wife, fighting to keep his land. The time might be coming sooner than we planned. If something happens to me, he'll need the map and the key. He'll need to understand what our family has been guarding. Another entry caught Boone's eye. Found 3 more 1916D Mercury dimes at the estate sale in Colorado Springs. People don't know what they have. 40 years of collecting, buying from ignorant sellers, trading with other collectors who needed cash fast. What started as grandfather's small coin collection is now worth a fortune that could change Boone's life forever. Boone's hands shook slightly. How had this stranger known about Sarah's death? Known about their financial troubles? How had Malachi been watching them from hundreds of miles away without ever making contact? The last entry in the journal was dated 1 week before Malachi's death. I can't take it with me, but I can make sure it goes to the right person. Everything depends on him figuring out the clues. The collection is worth more than he could imagine, but only if he's smart enough to find it. Clara grabbed his arm. Papa, what collection? What was Uncle Malachi hiding? Before Boone could answer, Rusty started barking frantically outside. Through the dusty window, they saw a group of horsemen approaching up the dirt road toward the house. The riders slowed, stopped, and a well-dressed man in an expensive suit dismounted, looking completely out of place in the middle of nowhere. The stranger walked straight to their front door and knocked with authority. The man at the door had the kind of smile that made Boone instantly suspicious. Too wide, too practiced, like a salesman who'd learned exactly how to look trustworthy without actually being trustworthy. Mr. Carter, I'm Richard Thornton from Consolidated Land Development. He extended a manicured hand. I understand you recently inherited this property today. Boone didn't shake the offered hand. How'd you know about that? We just got here 3 hours ago. We've been monitoring this property since Malachi's death 2 months ago. Motion sensors, cameras. We expected someone would eventually show up to claim the inheritance. Thornton glanced around the broken-down ranch with obvious distaste. I'm here to save you from a considerable burden. Clara stepped closer to her father, clutching the journal against her chest. Thornton's eyes followed the movement, lingering on the old leather book with unmistakable interest. This land is worthless, Thornton continued. No water rights, poor soil. Too remote for farming. But my company specializes in, shall we say, making the best of difficult situations. I'm prepared to offer you $50,000 cash for the entire property. $50,000. More money than Boone had ever seen at one time. Enough to pay off the bank, save their farm, give Clara a chance at college. But something in Thornton's eager expression made him hesitate. That's generous, Boone said carefully. Maybe too generous for worthless land. Thornton's smile flickered for just a moment. I'm a businessman, Mr. Carter. I see potential where others see problems. The offer stands for 24 hours only. After Thornton drove away, Clara grabbed her father's arm. Papa, he knew about the journal. Did you see how he looked at it? Boone had noticed. He'd also noticed how quickly Thornton had found them, how he'd known exactly when to arrive. Someone had been watching, waiting for them to show up at the ranch. That afternoon, they returned to the oak tree with shovels in the journal. Boone read aloud from one of Malachi's entries. The old tree marks the center point, 30 paces north, 20 paces west, then straight down 6 feet. What's below has been there since our grandfather's time. They measured carefully, marking the spot with a piece of broken fence post. The ground here was different, softer, like it had been disturbed before and allowed to settle. Boone drove the shovel deep and felt it strike something solid. Metal, he grunted, digging around the edges of whatever lay buried. Clara helped him clear away the dirt. What they uncovered wasn't a treasure chest or a buried safe. It was a metal box, about the size of a coffin, with a heavy lock that looked like it might fit the key they'd found. But when Boone tried to lift the box, it wouldn't budge. It was either much heavier than it looked, or it was somehow attached to something bigger underground. We need tools, Boone said. Real tools. Come morning, we'll bring chains in the truck. Maybe we can... Clara suddenly grabbed his sleeve. Papa, listen. Vehicle engines. Multiple vehicles coming up the dirt road fast. Through the trees, Boone could see headlights bouncing in the gathering dusk. Too many headlights for a social visit. Hide the journal, he whispered urgently. But it was too late. 3 trucks surrounded the oak tree, and armed men stepped out into the fading light. Richard Thornton emerged from the lead vehicle, no longer wearing his practiced smile. "Mr. Carter," Thornton called out, "you should have taken my offer when you had the chance." Thornton's men spread out in a loose circle around the oak tree, their hands resting casually on their weapons, not pointing them, not threatening directly, but making their presence unmistakably clear. "There's no need for dramatics, Mr. Carter," Thornton said, his voice calm but carrying an edge. "I'm still willing to make a deal, but the price just went down to $30,000. Boone positioned himself between the men and Clara, his mind racing. 6 armed men, 1 old wagon that probably wouldn't move fast enough to matter, and nowhere to run that wouldn't leave them exposed in open ground. "What's really buried here, Thornton? You mean you don't know?" Thornton laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Your uncle Malachi spent 40 years collecting rare coins, gold pieces, silver dollars, commemorative sets from around the world. According to our research, the collection is worth approximately $100 million, assuming someone knows how to liquidate it properly through the right auction houses and private collectors." Clara's grip tightened on the journal. "How do you know about Uncle Malachi's collection?" "Because my company has been trying to buy this land for 3 years. Malachi refused every offer, no matter how high we went. A stubborn old man protecting a fortune he couldn't spend." Boone felt pieces clicking together in his mind. The heavy key, the metal box that wouldn't move, the journal entries about something too valuable to take with him. Malachi hadn't just been a hermit. He'd been a collector, accumulating wealth and hiding it from the world. "The old man finally died," Thornton continued, "and left his treasure to a farmer who doesn't even know what he's inherited. That seems wasteful, don't you think?" One of Thornton's men stepped closer to the partially excavated hole. "Boss, they've already found the main vault. Looks like they were trying to dig it up." Vault. Not just a buried box, but something bigger. Boone realized why they hadn't been able to lift what they'd uncovered. It wasn't meant to be moved. It was meant to be opened in place. "Here's what's going to happen," Thornton said. "You're going to use that key you found. Open the vault, and we're going to split the contents. 60% for my organization, 40% for you. Far more money than you'd see in 10 lifetimes of farming." Clara whispered urgently, "Papa, we can't trust him." She was right, but Boone also noticed something in Thornton's tone. He needed them alive. "Why don't you just take it all? You've got the guns." Thornton's smile turned cold. "Because rare coin authentication requires legal documentation. The most valuable pieces need provenance certificates, inheritance papers, legal transfer documents. Without the rightful heir's signature and cooperation, we'd be selling $100,000 coins for 10% of their value to black market dealers." Boone looked down at the metal surface they'd partially uncovered. In the flickering light of Thornton's torch, he could see that it wasn't just a simple box. There were hinges along one side, and what looked like multiple lock mechanisms. The key they'd found might open one lock, but there were clearly others. "The key isn't enough," Boone said slowly. "This thing has multiple locks." Thornton's confident expression flickered with uncertainty. "What do you mean?" "Look for yourself. Your uncle was paranoid. One key opens one lock, but there are at least 3 more. And I'm guessing we need more than just keys to open them." Thornton knelt beside the hole and examined the vault more closely. His torch revealed what Boone had hoped he'd see. Additional mechanisms that looked like combination locks, each one different from the others. "Find the combinations," Thornton ordered. "Search the house again, check the journal. Whatever it takes." But Boone was already thinking ahead. Malachi had been too smart to leave everything in one place. The combinations were probably hidden somewhere else entirely, maybe scattered across multiple locations. And that might be their only chance at survival. 2 of Thornton's men escorted Boone and Clara back to the ranch house, while the others stood guard over the buried vault. The journal felt heavy in Clara's hands as they walked through the darkness, Thornton's flashlight casting long shadows that seemed to reach for them. "Every page," Thornton ordered once they were inside. "Read every single entry. Look for numbers, dates, anything that could be a combination." Clara opened the journal to the first page and began reading aloud. Entry after entry chronicled Malachi's solitary life, his careful acquisition of rare coins, his growing paranoia about being discovered. But no obvious combinations emerged from the rambling text. "Wait," Clara said, stopping at an entry from 2 years ago. "Papa, listen to this. Eleanor always said the important dates make the best passwords. Birth, death, marriage, heartbreak. The numbers that matter most are the ones we never forget. Boone felt his chest tighten. Eleanor's birthday was March 15, 1952. His own birthday was August 23, 1978. His wedding anniversary had been June 12, 2003. But which dates would Malachi have considered important enough to use? Keep reading, Thornton demanded. 3 pages later, Clara found another clue. I've hidden the sequence where only family would think to look. Where Eleanor used to leave messages for me when we were children. Where the old game began. What game? Thornton asked sharply. Boone's mind raced back to his childhood. To the stories his mother used to tell about growing up on a ranch with her brother. She'd mentioned leaving secret messages. Playing games of hide-and-seek that could last for days. But she'd never been specific about locations. Clara suddenly closed the journal and looked at her father with excitement. Papa, the oak tree. Remember what was carved in the bark? The initials and that phrase about things staying buried. What if that's not the only carving? Without waiting for permission, Clara bolted for the door. Thornton's men followed, but she was already running toward the oak tree, flashlight beam dancing ahead of her feet. At the tree, Clara began circling the massive trunk, examining every inch of bark in the artificial light. Here, she called out. Look at this. On the far side of the oak, hidden from casual view, someone had carved a series of numbers into the bark decades ago. The cuts were old and weathered, but still readable. 03-1552, 08-2378, 06-12-03. Those are our family dates, Boone breathed. Mama's birthday. My birthday. My wedding day. Thornton grabbed the flashlight and examined the numbers more closely. 3 combinations. This could be what we need. But Clara was still searching the tree trunk. Wait, there's more. Look down here, near the roots. Lower on the tree, almost hidden by overgrown grass, was another carving. Not numbers this time, but letters. The real treasure isn't in the ground. It's in the knowing, EC. Boone stared at his mother's initials. The real treasure isn't in the ground, it's in the knowing? What did she mean? Clara was studying the message more carefully. Papa, what if Mama meant that the coins aren't the real secret? What if there's something else? Something about how to sell them? Or who to sell them to? Thornton's confident expression cracked. What are you talking about? 100 million in rare coins is the treasure. But you said it yourself, Clara replied. The coins are only valuable if someone knows how to liquidate them properly. Maybe the real treasure is knowing how to turn them into actual money without getting caught or cheated. Clara was already running back toward the house, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Papa, come on. If Mama left the message, she left the answer too. Inside the ranch house, Clara headed straight for the back bedroom where they'd found the journal. She dropped to her knees and began examining the loose floorboard more carefully. Here, she said, pulling up another board adjacent to the first. There's something else down here. Wrapped in the same kind of oilcloth was a second package, smaller than the journal. Inside was a hand-drawn map of the surrounding area, marked with locations Boone didn't recognize. But more importantly, there was a small notebook filled with names, addresses, and phone numbers. Trusted dealers and auction houses, read the cover. 12 locations for the coins, Clara counted quickly. But look at this, Papa. Uncle Malachi didn't just hide the coins. He documented every legitimate buyer, every honest dealer, every auction house that wouldn't ask questions or try to cheat us. Thornton snatched the notebook from her hands. This is impossible. You're telling me the real value isn't just in the coins, but in knowing how to sell them legally. Clara nodded. Anyone can find buried treasure. But turning 100 million in rare coins into actual cash without losing half of it to crooked dealers or government seizure. That takes knowledge. But as he studied the notebook more closely, his face went pale. The contacts were spread across the entire country, each one specialized in different types of rare coins. Some dealt only with gold pieces, others with silver commemoratives. Finding and coordinating with all of them would take months of careful negotiation. And most importantly, every legitimate dealer would require proper inheritance documentation and legal transfer papers that only Boone, as the rightful heir, could provide. The metal vault door opened with a grinding screech that echoed through the night air. Thornton's torch revealed neat rows of wooden boxes, each one carefully labeled in Malachi's precise handwriting. The first box Boone lifted felt impossibly heavy for its size. Open it, Thornton ordered. Inside, nestled in custom-fitted cloth, were gold coins that seemed to glow in the firelight. Clara gasped as she recognized some of the dates from Uncle Malachi's journal entries. 1933 double eagles, 1916 D, Mercury dimes, Morgan silver dollars in pristine condition. This is just one location, Clara whispered to her father. There are 11 more sites marked on that map. Thornton heard her. Exactly, which means we'll be working together for the rest of the night. My men will escort you to each location. You'll help us excavate the remaining collections, and then we'll begin the authentication process. Boone studied Thornton's face in the torchlight. What happens after we authenticate everything? After we sign your papers and help you sell to your dealers? Then you disappear, Thornton said matter-of-factly. New identities, relocation to somewhere far from here. You'll have your 40%, which comes to roughly $40 million. Enough to start over anywhere in the territories. Clara grabbed Boone's arm. Papa, he's talking about making us disappear permanently. Not permanently, Thornton corrected. Just permanently gone from this area. Too many people would ask questions if the legal inheritor of a $100 million coin collection suddenly died in an accident. But if Boone Carter and his daughter simply vanished one night, took their fortune and started new lives elsewhere, that's believable. One of Thornton's men approached with a long iron rod, probing the ground near the second marked location. The rod struck metal 20 feet north of the oak tree. Found another one, boss. As they began digging the second site, Clara noticed something that made her stomach turn cold. Thornton's men weren't just carrying guns and shovels. They had ropes, heavy sacks, and what looked like materials for covering things that needed to stay hidden. Papa, she whispered urgently. Look at what they brought. Boone followed her gaze and saw what she meant. These men had come prepared for more than just digging up coins. They'd come prepared for cleanup work that went beyond treasure hunting. The second vault was larger than the first, requiring all 6 men to lift it from the ground. When they finally got it open, even Thornton seemed stunned by the contents. Rows upon rows of rare coins, some in individual protective cases, others in complete mint sets that hadn't been opened in decades. How much is in this one box alone? One of Thornton's men asked. Thornton consulted Malachi's notebook, running his finger down a detailed inventory list. According to this, approximately $15 million. And we've only opened 2 of 12 locations. Clara felt her father's hand tighten on her shoulder. She could see the calculation running through his mind. If 2 boxes contained nearly 20 million in coins, and there were 10 more locations, they were looking at something far beyond the 100 million Thornton had originally estimated. But she also saw something else in her father's expression. A growing realization that no matter how much money was buried on this property, Thornton never intended for them to live long enough to spend their share. The ropes and sacks in Thornton's supplies weren't for protecting coins. They were for protecting Thornton from witnesses who could connect him to the theft. As they moved toward the third marked location, Clara began looking for opportunities to escape. But with 6 armed men surrounding them and nowhere to hide in the open ranch land, escape seemed impossible, unless they could find a way to turn Thornton's greed against him. The third location marked on Malachi's map led them to a spot near the collapsed barn, where the iron rod found nothing but silence. Thornton's men dug for 20 minutes before hitting bedrock. Empty, one of them announced, wiping sweat from his forehead. Thornton studied the map more carefully, his confidence beginning to crack. Check the coordinates again, make sure we're in the right spot. But Clara was studying the map from a different angle. Papa, look at this. The third location has a different symbol than the others. It's not a coin marker. She was right. Instead of the circular symbol that marked the first 2 vaults, the third location was marked with a square containing the letter W. W for what? Thornton demanded. Boone examined Malachi's journal again, flipping through pages they'd already read. Near the back, he found an entry that made his blood run cold. If anyone comes looking for the collection before Boone is ready, the warning system will tell him everything he needs to know. Eleanor always said we should have a backup plan. Warning system? Clara asked. Before Boone could answer, they heard the distant sound of approaching horses. Multiple riders, coming fast down the dirt road toward the ranch. Thornton's men immediately raised their weapons, but the torch flames were still too far away to identify. Expecting company? Boone asked. Thornton's face had gone pale in the flickering light. Nobody knows we're here, but Clara was putting the pieces together faster than anyone else. Papa, what if Uncle Malachi set up more than just treasure locations? What if some of the markers were warnings, designed to alert someone if people started digging here? The approaching horses were close enough now to count. 8 riders, maybe 10, all moving with the kind of speed that suggested urgency or anger. "We need to go," one of Thornton's men said nervously. "Now." But Thornton was staring at the journal in Boone's hands with a new kind of desperation. There has to be more information in there. Some way to find the remaining locations without triggering whatever system Malachi set up. Clara grabbed her father's arm. "Papa, read the last entry again, the one about the warning system." Boone flipped to the final page and read aloud. "The collection is worth more than anyone could imagine, but it comes with a price. Anyone who takes it by force, anyone who threatens Eleanor's family will discover that some treasures are better left buried. The real treasure isn't in the coins themselves, it's in the protection they buy." "Protection?" Thornton asked sharply. The approaching torchlights were close enough now to see that they belonged to law enforcement riders. Sheriff's men, maybe territorial marshals. Someone had indeed been watching, waiting for exactly this situation to develop. Clara's eyes widened with understanding. "Papa, Uncle Malachi didn't just collect coins. He bought protection. He paid people to watch over this place, to watch over us. The warning system wasn't mechanical. It was human." Thornton spun toward his men. "Load everything we've already found. We're leaving now." But it was too late. The lead riders had already reached the ranch house, and armed lawmen were spreading out in practiced formation. Someone shouted across the darkness, "This is the territorial marshal. Drop your weapons and step away from the excavation sites." One of Thornton's men made the mistake of raising his rifle. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions, and suddenly the ranch yard was lit up by muzzle flashes and torch flames. In the chaos, Clara grabbed the journal and the notebook from Thornton's hands, while Boone tackled her to the ground behind the oak tree. Bullets whined overhead as Thornton's men realized they were completely outgunned and outnumbered. "Territorial Marshal," the voice called out again. "This excavation is part of an ongoing investigation into illegal treasure hunting operations. Anyone interfering with territorial law enforcement will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law." Through the gunfire and shouting, Clara heard something that made her heart race with hope. One of the lawmen was calling out specific instructions that could only have come from someone who knew exactly what Thornton had been planning, someone who had been watching and waiting for exactly this moment to intervene. The gunfire stopped as suddenly as it had started. When the smoke cleared, 4 of Thornton's men lay face down in the dirt with territorial lawmen standing over them. Thornton himself sat with his hands bound behind his back with rope, blood trickling from a graze on his forehead. A tall woman in marshal's clothing approached Boone and Clara behind the oak tree. "Mr. Carter, I'm Marshal Sarah Martinez. Your Uncle Malachi hired our private security company 15 years ago to monitor this property and protect his legal heirs." Clara looked up at her father in amazement. "Uncle Malachi hired marshals?" "Not marshals directly," Martinez corrected. "But several of our officers work private security contracts when we're off duty. Malachi paid us a substantial retainer to watch this property and intervene if anyone ever tried to steal his collection through force or coercion." She helped them to their feet and handed Boone an official-looking document. "This is a letter from your uncle to be delivered only if someone threatened you or your daughter while attempting to access his collection." Boone opened the letter with shaking hands. Malachi's familiar handwriting covered 2 pages, but one paragraph stood out. "If you're reading this, it means someone tried to steal what belongs to you by right of inheritance. The collection is worth exactly $147 million, as verified by the auction house appraisals in the locked strongbox at the bank. The key to that strongbox is sewn into the lining of Eleanor's old jewelry case, which I had delivered to your farm this morning." $147 million, Clara whispered. Marshal Martinez nodded. "Your uncle was very thorough. Every coin has been authenticated, appraised, and legally documented. He even pre-arranged buyers for the most valuable pieces, ensuring you'll receive full market value without having to navigate the rare coin market yourself." Thornton looked up from where he sat in the dirt. "Impossible. Nobody plans that far ahead." "Malachi Brooks did," Martinez replied. "He started planning the day your mother Eleanor died. Mr. Carter. He knew that someday her son might need the financial security she never had. So he spent the last 30 years not just collecting coins, but building a legal framework to ensure you could inherit them safely." Clara was studying the letter more carefully. "Papa, look at this part. Uncle Malachi says there are instructions for selling the collection, and lawyers already hired to handle the taxes, and even a trust fund set up for any children I might have someday." Marshal Martinez confirmed this with a nod. Your uncle thought of everything. The collection will be transferred to your legal ownership within 48 hours. The authentication documents are already prepared. The buyers are already identified and ready to purchase. You could liquidate the entire collection within 6 months if you choose to. Boone looked across the ranch at the excavation sites, then back at the broken-down house where this adventure had started just hours ago. What about Thornton? What happens to him? Territorial charges for armed robbery, conspiracy, attempted kidnapping, and interfering with lawful inheritance proceedings. His organization has been under surveillance for months. They've been targeting families who inherit valuable collections, using intimidation and violence to steal what doesn't belong to them. Thornton's face contorted with rage. You can't prove anything. We never actually stole anything. You held a 16-year-old girl at gunpoint while demanding access to her legal inheritance, Martinez replied calmly. That's enough for 25 years in territorial prison under current statutes. Your operation is finished, Mr. Thornton. As territorial officers loaded Thornton and his surviving men onto a prison wagon, Clara grabbed her father's arm. Papa, is this real? Are we really going to be rich? Boone looked at his daughter, then at the letter in his hands, then at the excavation sites that had revealed only a fraction of Malachi's carefully planned gift. For the first time since Sarah died, he felt something that had been missing from his life for too long. Hope. Yeah, sweetheart. I think we really are. Marshal Martinez approached them one final time. Mr. Carter, your uncle left one more instruction. He said you should burn this ranch house down and start fresh somewhere else. The past has given you what you need for the future. Now it's time to build something new. 6 months later, Boone Carter stood on the porch of a beautiful ranch house in Colorado Territory, watching Clara practice her riding technique in the corral they'd built together. The morning sun cast long shadows across their new property, 3,000 acres of prime ranch land purchased with a fraction of Uncle Malachi's inheritance. The sale of Malachi's coin collection had exceeded even the most optimistic appraisals. Final total, $151 million after taxes and fees. Boone had kept his promise to start fresh somewhere new, but he'd also honored his farming roots by investing in land, livestock, and a future his daughter deserved. Clara rode her horse over to the fence line, grinning with the kind of confidence that only comes from knowing your family is safe and secure. Papa, the school teacher in town says I'm ready for advanced mathematics and literature. She thinks I should consider becoming a teacher myself someday. Boone smiled back at her. The scared 16-year-old who'd clutched Malachi's journal in a broken-down ranch house was gone, replaced by a young woman with unlimited possibilities ahead of her. The transformation hadn't happened overnight, but it had been complete. You sure you want to be a teacher instead of a treasure hunter? He teased. One adventure like that was enough for me, Clara laughed. Besides, someone needs to help manage all these animals you keep buying. Their ranch now housed 47 rescue horses, 30 head of cattle, and enough chickens to supply eggs to half the county. Boone had discovered that having money wasn't about spending it, it was about using it to build something meaningful. The old debt from their failing farm had been paid off within a week of receiving the inheritance. The bank that had threatened foreclosure now sent representatives offering investment opportunities every few months. Boone had even hired some of his former neighbors who'd lost their own farms to economic hardship, giving them jobs and housing on the new ranch. Rusty barked from his favorite spot on the porch, drawing Boone's attention to a lone horseman coming up the long driveway. Marshal Martinez dismounted, carrying a leather satchel. Mr. Carter, Clara, she nodded to both of them. I have news about Thornton. Clara climbed down from the fence and joined them on the porch. Please tell me it's good news. Territorial court sentenced him to 35 years in prison without possibility of release. His organization has been completely dismantled, and we've recovered stolen collections worth over $400 million from other families they targeted. She handed Boone the satchel. This is the final documentation regarding your case. Thornton's appeals have been exhausted. He'll never threaten you or anyone else again. Boone opened the satchel and found official court documents confirming Thornton's conviction and sentencing. After months of testimony and legal proceedings, justice had finally been served completely and definitively. There's one more thing, Martinez added. We found evidence that your Uncle Malachi helped fund our investigation into Thornton's organization for over 2 years before his death. He knew they were targeting families with valuable inheritances, and he wanted to make sure they were stopped. Clara shook her head in amazement. Uncle Malachi was protecting people he'd never even met. He was protecting his family's legacy, Martinez replied. and ensuring that other families wouldn't go through what he was afraid you might face. After Martinez rode away, Boone and Clara sat together on their porch swing, watching the sun set over their new life. The man who'd once had $17 to his name now possessed wealth beyond imagination. But more importantly, he'd gained something far more valuable, the knowledge that his daughter would never want for anything. "Papa," Clara said quietly, "do you think Mama and Uncle Malachi would be proud of what we've built here?" Boone pulled her closer. "Sweetheart, I think they'd be amazed by the woman you've become and the life we've created. This ranch isn't just about the money Uncle Malachi left us. It's about the love and planning that went into making sure we'd be okay." As stars appeared in the Colorado Territory sky, Boone reflected on how a mysterious inheritance had transformed not just their financial situation, but their entire understanding of family, legacy, and the power of planning for those you love. The poor farmer and his daughter had indeed uncovered a $100 million secret, but the real treasure had been learning that they were never alone. They'd always been protected by family who loved them enough to plan for their future, even from beyond the grave. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale where destiny and courage collide in ways you never expected. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything to us.